In this video I will share my macro photography experience with the new Leica M10-R. That's the newest Leica M rangefinder camera which just hit the market a few weeks ago, but everything I'm going to say applies fully to any M-Series camera in the Leica universe and almost any M-Series lens. So it's kind of a universal, let's call it a tutorial, where I provide some technical background, practical experience, as well as some tips and tricks what you can do to make your macro photography with Leica M-Series cameras effective. Let's kick off the video. It is trivial to mention, but photography always needs a camera body and a lens. And the easiest way is to use a lens with macro capabilities. And the way to find out whether your lens is macro capable is to look into the spec sheet and find one line item which is called the reproduction ratio. The smaller your reproduction ratio, the more far away you will be from macro photography, and the larger your reproduction ratio, the better will be the macro capabilities of the lens. I have here on the Leica M10-R the Apo-Summicron 50mm lens, widest open aperture f2. It's an aspherical lens, so nice optical properties. And if we look for a moment into the spec sheet of that lens, we find here the reproduction ratio, and you see that ratio is very, very small. Now, a reproduction ratio of 1:1 or 100% would mean that subjects on the image or the sensor appear in real size as they are in reality. If your reproduction ratio is smaller, it's kind of scaled down. If your reproduction ratio is larger than 100%, you have a true magnification. I know this is a bit simplified in the way I explain this, but that's basically what it is, and I think these are the essentials you need to know. For Leica M lenses, you typically have almost always a small reproduction ratio, like we just saw it on the Apo-Summicron 50mm. So these lenses per se, without additional tools, are not suitable for macro photography. Leica advertises one macro lens, which is the Macro LMR 90mm, in particular in combination with the Leica macro adapter. But in general, the M lenses have low reproduction or small reproduction ratios and are not suitable for macro photography. To complete the story, let's quickly make an excursion into the Sony Alpha camera universe. So this is a Sony Alpha lens, FE 2.8, 90mm macro. It even has optical stabilization. And I did shoot a lot with that lens on my Sony Alpha cameras, currently on the Sony A7R Mark IV. And this lens has a reproduction ratio of 1:1. So you get 100% replication of your subject on the sensor or on the image. And that's very nice. And you can go beyond 1:1 or 100%, and then it's called a true magnification. And here's an example of such a lens. So this is the Canon macro photo lens MPE, 65mm, widest open aperture 2.8, as we just saw it on the Sony lens. But here it says 1, which is 100% or 1:1, up to 5 times magnification. And it is very tricky to shoot with lenses even with 1:1, but even more if there is true magnification, because your depth of field becomes very, very shallow, and typically you need to apply focus stacking as a technique to get meaningful, sharp images across your subject. If a lens has a small reproduction ratio, like my beloved Apo-Summicron 50mm here, there is an alternative way to increase the reproduction ratio, and that's by increasing the distance between the lens and the camera sensor. The more you increase the distance between the lens and the camera sensor, and again I'm speaking here in simplified terms, the higher your reproduction ratio will be. And there are standard tubes which are available for many camera brands and systems, and Leica has, for this purpose, their Leica M macro adapter. The macro adapter comes, like all other M lenses, in a nice leather pouch, fully branded by Leica, by the way. And if we open this up, you see what it is. Let's get this out. So here is the mount to the camera body, and here, let's get this open. You see that there's nothing in it. This is just a tube, as I mentioned before. And if you mount your lens here and your camera here, you increase the distance between the lens and the camera sensor, and in this way increase the reproduction ratio. And now this one here can also be screwed out, so you can further increase that distance between the lens and the camera sensor. And if you listen to that, it's buttery smooth. The quality of that adapter is, you know, without questions. I guess you hear nothing. It's because there is nothing to hear. So this is buttery smooth, very well built, very nice. And here is your lens mount. This one goes into the camera, and then you increase the distance from the lens to the sensor, and in this way achieve reproduction ratios. And now it becomes a bit technical. Up to 1:2, which I mentioned before, is a typical macro setup, but not as suitable for super close-ups, like if you would go for 1:1 or 100%. But 1:2 is pretty nice. Many lens manufacturers actually claim that a lens has macro capabilities already from give or take 20% on. And this one here is 50%, 1:2, so can truly be called a macro photography setup. Now let's mount that thing here. Let's get this out of the way. Let's take the Leica M10-R and unmount the lens. Now here we go. This is the adapter. Let's see where it fits. I can't see it so well through the camera. Here we go. Let's wait for the click. Now this is solid. And then here on the camera body, I think we have to go here. And then also we wait for the click. Here we go. So now this is solid and mounted, and you see now that you can further increase the distance between the Apo-Summicron and the Leica M10-R sensor, and this way get a higher reproduction ratio. And I'm going to test this now out and also measure it in terms of metrical terms and illustrate the effect of this macro adapter in combination with the Apo-Summicron 50mm. And then I will show two more lenses, which I will demonstrate in a live shooting and show the sample images how this macro setup really works in practice. So to kick this off, I removed the macro adapter and have now only the Apo-Summicron mounted on the Leica M10-R. And I have a little subject, which I will find now here in my live view. And I will switch this sharp. And you see this is sharp now. So this is a Star Wars Lego warrior, which will be my subject for shooting. The focus peaking indicates nicely when this is sharp. Let's go to an aperture of f4 maybe, in order to have some depth of field. But what I really want to do is, I want to look at the lens distance scale here and want to go to the minimum focus distance, and that's 70 centimeter here. So this is now really here at the minimum focus distance. And now I want to go into magnification and move the camera until the warrior becomes sharp here. And you see now this is fairly sharp, I think. Let's see how close I can get. Now it's getting out of focus, so I have to pull the camera back a little bit. Let's see here on the... I think this is good. So now this is sharp. And I want to measure now with the iPhone if that is really 70 centimeters or if it is not 70 centimeters. And for this I use the augmented reality measurement tool on the iPhone. So I want to now use the measure tool, augmented reality, on the iPhone 11 Pro to verify this. Let's say the sensor is sitting around here, and let's move up to the subject and let's see where we end up. So this is here measured as 69. I think that's pretty good. So here we basically have the distance. Let's take a photo and let's see if we open that up. 69 centimeters. Let's mark the position of the camera on the table here. So let's say we are here, and let's say, well, painting with the left hand is a bit more difficult. Let's say we are here. And what we did now is we found that with this distance, which the lens distance scale said 70 centimeter, the iPhone AR app confirmed 69 centimeter. With this, the subject is sharp and in focus. So let's take an image here. Let's have a look at the image in magnification, and you see this is super sharp. Very nice, my warrior here. And you also see that this has a nice bokeh in the background based on the lens being at f4. Alright, now let's mount the macro adapter now, and let's see what we get if the macro adapter is mounted. So let's unmount the lens. This is it. Let's mount the lens to the adapter until it clicks, and let's mount the adapter. And again click. Very good. When now the adapter is mounted and I place my camera back between these two green marks on my table here, the image which was sharp before at this distance and at 70 centimeter focus distance is no longer sharp. And that's because now the distance between the lens and the camera sensor has increased based on that in-between adapter. And I can make this even further elevated by screwing the adapter and getting the lens even more far away from the sensor in the way you saw it before in the video. So this is no longer sharp. What I can do to make this sharp now is I can just shorten the distance between the subject and between the camera. And I think I should go to a different magnification now on my film camera here and adjust this a little bit to demonstrate this to the end. So I move and move and move, and now you see the little warrior here gets in focus. I think actually I need to put something under the warrior now to lift this poor guy a little bit up, because the distance between the lens from a horizontal perspective vertically down to the table is not bringing the full warrior into the image. So here the warrior, who I placed now on a little lens cap here, is in focus, and if I move back the camera it gets out of focus. If I move too close it gets out of focus too. Let's now quickly measure the focal distance we have here achieved with the adapter. You see the red points from the focus peaking, so that looks quite nice. And let's measure now what the distance is and what we actually get closer to our subject based on the macro adapter. And by how much we can get closer, we see here in this again AR measurement. So from 70 centimeters we are down now to 24 centimeters, which of course increases the reproduction ratio. So let's now move the adapter further out and in this way increase the distance further between the lens and the camera sensor and the Leica M10-R. And by doing this you see that now my preview becomes out of focus again, so I can now move the camera even closer to my subject, which will again increase the reproduction ratio. So I think that's it. And we are now even closer than we've been before. What you saw in these previews on the camera when we got closer and closer to our little warrior here is that the warrior did no longer fully fit into the image and it was cut off from the legs and from the head to some extent. And the reason is simple. Let's go back to what I said about reproduction ratio. And I said a reproduction ratio of 1:1 is if the replication of the image on the sensor is exactly of the same size as it is in reality. Now, if we open the camera and look at the sensor here, then we have here a 36 × 24 millimeter full frame sensor. But if you look at the warrior, this is actually more than 2 times bigger than the height of the sensor. And that's why it did cut it off even at a reproduction ratio of 1:2, which is the maximum you can achieve with Leica M lenses and the macro adapter. And that's something to bear in mind. But of course, if you go for bees or for some flowers or insects, this will be even not at a 1:1, but a 1:2 on the Leica M lineup, because a 1:2 reproduction ratio still makes things about 50% smaller than as they appear in reality. In the third measurement, when we had the macro adapter fully extended here by screwing it out and moved the camera to the minimum focus distance to the subject, we ended up by give or take 21-22 centimeters. And this is pretty close for shooting insects like bees, wasps, flies, things like that. So I will use for my live shooting and demonstration and for the sample images which come now in the last part of the video, longer focal length. Not the Apo-Summicron 50mm, but I will use a very special lens which I own for some time. And it's, I think, one of my best lenses I ever had. It's this one here. And this is the Summilux 90mm. Let's open this up. So this is the Summilux-M 90mm widest open aperture f1.5 aspherical lens. That's a fantastic lens, of course, for macro shootings, and I will show you sample images taken with the macro adapter and that lens. But it's a very expensive lens, and there are cheaper lenses in the M universe, of course, which you could take. So here's a special edition of a lens which you can also get much cheaper, and that is the let's try it. Oh, we cannot see it here. It's actually because it's a special edition on the lens itself. It's an Apo-Summicron-M 1:2 75mm aspherical, and there are other 90mm lenses which you can use in the M lineup. And as I mentioned before, the specially developed lens for the macro adapter is actually the Macro Elmar 90mm. So we go for live shooting with both lenses, the 75mm and the Summilux 1.5 90mm, and I'm going to share the sample images then in a moment. So I mounted now the Summilux 90mm f1.5 to my Leica M10-R, and my recommendation is the following: screw out and increase the distance between lens and sensor as much as possible with the adapter here. You see this is fully screwed out, it only goes backwards here, and adjust the distance scale of the lens to the minimum distance, which is 1 meter on the Summilux. And on the aperture side, go to some aperture which gives you a reasonable depth of field, maybe f5.6 or somewhere in between f8 and 5.6. Go to not the lowest ISO, maybe something like 800 or 400, maybe even 1600, and use a reasonably fast shutter speed if you want to go for insects like I do in my shooting in a moment, because I was looking for bees. And since I was doing this handhold, my recommendation actually is to keep the settings fixed, not try to focus handhold on a quickly moving subject like a bee, but keep it at the minimum distance, have a reasonable aperture, have the highest reproduction ratio you can get with the macro adapter, and then for focusing, just move the camera a little bit to get it in focus and take the shot when it is in focus. And actually it's a big help if you have the electronic viewfinder to use this for focus peaking, because then you will have the camera pressed on your head and in this way get an even more sturdy shooting situation if the camera is not mounted on a tripod. Now let's go into the live shooting and let's have a look at the sample images. I will now show 6 sample images, and at the end I was shooting more with the 90mm Summilux than the 75mm Summicron. Let's have a look yourself. If you put the price tag of the Leica M macro adapter in relation to the price tag of typical Leica M lenses, then the macro adapter is actually a nice affordable add-on if you already own an M-Series camera and M-Series lenses, let's say between 28mm focal length and up to 90mm. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and stay tuned on my content. There is more to come in the next weeks in various directions. Thanks for watching and peace out.